He says Lincoln instead of Laken. Never apologizes, never, clears that up. But he wants everyone to know that he shouldn't have said illegal about her murderer. Instead, he's going to say undocumented. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovich. And we are Unapologetically Outspoken. Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. So we all know that Biden gave his State of the Union speech last Thursday. And I'm going to guess most of you have already heard about it. So we won't waste a ton of time on what he actually talked about, because as predicted, it was really just another very loud, angry old man rant. And I stand by my belief that there is literally no way that that man could have kept up that kind of aggressive energy for an hour without being shot up with adrenaline or some kind of steroid or stimulant. And I was listening to commentary from some of the leftard reporters, and they were saying things like, he must have eaten his Wheaties for breakfast and had a cup of coffee because he came out strong and he showed he's a force to be reckoned with. And Biden sure proved his capabilities. And I was like, what the fuck are you people talking about? Like, as you frequently say, Stephanie, it was a total theatrical performance. And I find it absolutely maddening that anyone could think that this speech was anything less than like a brimstone and fire preacher rant, except instead of being done by, a preacher, it was done by an old man who slurs their words and mumbles while screaming. And it was just as bad as the Dark Brandon speech, if not worse, because it was nothing but like this very vehement hate speech. And he said nothing new. And there wasn't one single thing in that speech that to me seemed positive for Americans. And his entire focus was on exactly what we expected, giving more money to Ukraine to stop Russia from taking over the world. And then he lectured and threatened the Supreme Court for overturning Roe v. Wade. And of course, he talked shit about Trump, but he never actually used Trump's name. And he just kept referring to him as his predecessor or his political opponent. And the whole thing was frankly like a delusional shit show of lies. And he talked about how he's created this economy that's the envy of the entire world, which was laughable, that he fixed inflation, equally laughable. He said crime has gone down 30% since he's in office, which
where are they getting that number?
Yeah, especially because the same day or the next day, I think it was Friday, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, announced she was deploying over 750 National Guard and 250 state and metropolitan transit police to help the NYPD patrol the subway system. Why? Because the crime is so fucking out of control there. And I was listening to the Morning Wire on Friday, and they were saying that this is the largest deployment of law enforcement in New York since 9/11. Like, does that sound like a state enjoying a 30% reduction in crime, Stephanie?
No, hell no.
Yeah, not at all. And yet this is, a blue state where the vast majority of Biden supporters live. And I just don't get it. And of course, he blamed the GOP for the border crisis. And he did bring up his age. And he said, like, yes, I'm old. But then he said his age is an asset to the country because he has all these years of experience, and everything bad the country's been going through for the last 3 years isn't his fault. And it's all his big, bad, terrible predecessor, Trump. And the entire thing was fucking absurd and one big lie. And of course, it was not without drama. And he was giving the address in the House chamber, and it was during a joint meeting of Congress. And you had Republicans booing and yelling, and then you had the Democrats clapping. And he was talking about how Trump failed the American people during COVID and how America's safer today than it was before he took office. And it was so embarrassing because Kamala is sitting behind him, and so is the House Speaker.
Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson. I wanted to say Mike Pence, and I was like, no. So Kamala and Mike Johnson are sitting behind him. And Kamala kept standing up and clapping like a good little soldier every time his yelling escalated and all the other sheep in Congress were applauding. And what was funny is she even stood up and applauded for herself when Biden was yelling about how he's the first president to have a female vice president. And then at one point, there was a gentleman in the audience who like stood up and started shouting about the United States Marines. And I couldn't make out the rest of what he said because there was so much commotion going on. And I couldn't find anything that mentioned who he was, but he was escorted out of the room. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene at one point shouts out, "What about Laken Riley?" And Democrats are yelling for her to shut up. And then Biden calls her Lincoln Riley instead of Laken Riley. And it was just completely embarrassing. And as usual, the rest of the world is watching the complete dysfunctionality of our government. And the one word that I can use to sum up the whole thing is gross, because that's what it was, in my opinion. Just completely gross. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. Same thing, just disgusted. And I actually want to play a clip of him saying the wrong name because I was so disgusted by the way that he tried to make her death sound like, oh, it's no big deal because thousands of people die every day. And then, of course, like has to make it about himself by saying that he understands what the parents are going through because like he's also lost children. So listen to this.
About him, it's not about me. I'd be a winner. Not really. I
Can't hear anything. Mm-mm.
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself.
Okay, so you probably can't hear him too well because he mumbles and they were all yelling.
Heard that last part. The last part came through very clear once he said Lincoln Riley, and from then on,
Lincoln Riley,
yeah.
Yeah, so her mother posted on Facebook after this happened. She says, Biden doesn't even know my child's name. It's pathetic. If you're going to say her name, even when forced to do so, at least say the right name. And I can only imagine how pissed off she is. And so here's like the other thing. He said she was killed by an illegal.
Mhm.
Well, he was asked by reporters afterwards, you know, do you regret saying that word? And then he did something in Georgia where he like backtracked and basically said like, well, yeah, it should be undocumented. So let me sum this up. He says Lincoln instead of Laken, never apologizes, never, you know, clears that up. But he wants everyone to know that he shouldn't have said illegal about her murderer. Instead, he's going to say undocumented. Like, that is what is so disgusting about this whole thing. I mean, I cannot even imagine what those parents are feeling. And then it's like, aren't these State of the Union speeches supposed to be positive and patriotic and like unite Americans on the great things that are happening in our country? But just like you said, it was just an angry, divisive old man yelling the entire time. And then did you see him doing that like creepy ass grin? It's like he's got that
Yes.
smile, but it's like not a real smile. It's like filled with hatred. Oh, he did that a few times, especially when like Marjorie Taylor Greene was yelling, and it was just like creepy as fuck. And it's just, he's clearly confused. I mean, like you said, he told absurd lies, like he's clearly living in another reality. And all I can think is maybe they were trying to appeal to this large group of people that are just filled with hatred for Trump and our country. So maybe like that's what he was trying to do is get them all fired up. But like you said, he outright lied. He gave false stats about everything from crime to the economy. But of course, the media isn't going to fact check any of it. And then the whole thing centered around protecting Ukraine's borders. And it took him almost an hour to talk about our own border, which is one of the biggest concerns of Americans. Like he literally talked about the price of Doritos before he talked about the border. And so what I got from this whole thing is he has two things to run on: Ukraine and abortion. And also gender equality, which he defined as gender affirming care, which we've done plenty of episodes on how
Yeah.
dangerous that is. But like, unfortunately for him, Americans aren't concerned with that right now. They're concerned with our safety, our border, crime that's like through the roof, the fact that we're on the brink of world war, and the fact that we can't even fill our grocery carts due to inflation. And so, like, that's what's going to be on the minds of these voters. And I don't think he really eased anyone's mind with any of that stuff. And I think this is probably the only coherent speech we'll see between now and November. You know, like, I don't think there's any way he's going to debate Trump. He's,
Okay, wait, I
well,
think we're not going to see him again for like a week or two because after being on that much adrenaline or whatever he was on for an entire hour, like old man needs a rest. Like I don't think we're going to
mhm.
see him in the news for days.
It reminds me, I watched that Elvis movie and it was showing them like sticking a needle in Elvis's arm, like right before he would go out on stage. Like that's really what they do with him.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, like he doesn't have the stamina to go and campaign. So I don't know what they're gonna do, but I think this is the only speech we're gonna get that at least somewhat makes sense. Um, and I think that Americans on both the right and the left are sick of it, you know? And then you have the pro-Palestinian protesters that blocked his motorcade from getting there on time. They completely blocked the road. And that's his own party that can't stand him.
Yeah.
So I think he's in a much worse position than in 2020. Oh, and then the man that stood up yelling during the speech was the father of one of our soldiers that died during the Afghanistan withdrawal. And so what
Okay.
he was yelling, and we couldn't really hear it clearly, was remember Abbey Gate. So this guy ends up getting arrested by Capitol Police and charged with a misdemeanor of crowding, obstructing, or incommodating. I'm not sure if I said that right, but it's like that's what happens to a Gold Star family. Like that's how Biden treats Gold Star families. They get arrested for speaking out. Meanwhile, all the protesters that have, spoken out on the left, like they're all fine. None of them got arrested. So it's just crazy. But anyhow, the families told reporters that Biden has yet to reach out to them, despite them reaching out on numerous occasions to understand what happened the day their kids died at Abbey Gate during the Afghanistan withdrawal. And no call, no email, no nothing from the White House. Then the most crazy part of the whole thing, in my opinion, was when Biden threatened the Supreme Court justices who were sitting in the front row. And he says, quote, with all due respect, justices, women are not without, and then he like mumbles, electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much. That sounds like a threat to me. Like, apparently, if you're Chuck Schumer or Biden, you can threaten the Supreme Court and there's no repercussions. No one says a thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And to what you were saying about, the families trying to reach out to him about what happened in Afghanistan, he doesn't fucking care. That's why he doesn't get back to them because he doesn't fucking care.
Mm.
He just, even if he did, he'd probably be sitting there like fucking eating ice cream with a smirk on his face while apologizing. I mean, he's just a disgusting human being. And on like a separate note, did you see that multiple government websites went down right when Biden started talking, like right at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of his speech?
Yep.
And it was like multiple like FEMA, DHS, Immigrations and Custom Enforcement, and even Secret Service. All their websites went down for like 20 minutes. And I guess it's being investigated by the FBI and DHS, and they have no explanation for it. But keep in mind, this is the same week that Facebook and Messenger and Instagram went down on Tuesday throughout the United States, along with parts of Europe, the UK, China, Australia, and Mexico. Like, this is weird, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely something weird. And it was like multiple sites because I was trying to watch Trump's play-by-play on Truth Social and it kept like doing that spinny thing and saying it couldn't connect. So yeah, it was reminding me exactly of what happened on Super Tuesday. And then like people keep posting stuff and like not just people, I mean news outlets about like the solar eclipse on April 8th. And I guess like a ton of schools are going to be closed that day, which I think is weird. And then people are posting that like different cities are telling people to stock up on water and gas and food and all these different things. And then we also are hearing and seeing all these articles about these supposed solar flares. And in my opinion, like, I think it's all bullshit. I think they are going to use this whole like solar flare, eclipse, whatever, as an excuse to either cut the power or the internet or both, like around election time. Like, I feel like they're testing all of this out in an election year and like it's just going to get worse. So there's definitely something weird going on there. But did you see the Republican recap by Katie Britt, who is a senator of Alabama?
Unfortunately, yes.
I'm going to play just a short clip of what she sounds like.
Border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable. From fentanyl poisonings to horrific murders, there are empty chairs tonight at kitchen tables just like this one because of President Biden's senseless border policies. Mr. President, enough is enough. Innocent Americans are dying, and you only have yourself to blame. Fulfill your oath of office. Reverse your policies, end this crisis, and stop the suffering. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable.
Okay, I can't listen anymore, but doesn't it sound like a soap opera the way she's talking?
Oh, yeah. And what's sad is like, she's not wrong in what she said.
No, the
But-
content's great, but the
Yes.
delivery, I'm like, oh my gosh, drama queen. Like, it just sounds so ridiculous.
Yeah, I was listening to Megyn Kelly's show over the weekend, and she had a couple guests on, and they were talking about it, and they were describing it like she was auditioning for a role on a Lifetime movie, and they were like, "Okay, girl, like you're not Meryl Streep, okay?" And this is like a total fuck up and a missed opportunity for the Republican Party, which frankly, I agree with that. And then Megyn Kelly played a clip of Katie talking during a debate in Congress, like a random clip. And she sounded great. She was very well put together. You could see why she is a senator. I mean, it made sense. But this speech was so overly dramatized and overacted that it was frankly just like ridiculous. And it did nothing to help the Republican Party.
No, and then people are saying she's on the short list to be Trump's VP. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, I think
no.
she just bombed that interview. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But let's move on away from this horrible speech to the equally horrible federal budget. Because as usual, in the 11th hour, Republicans caved and Congress averted a government shutdown. And on Friday, they passed a consolidated bill that's going to partially fund the government for the remainder of the fiscal year, which should go through September. So they passed 6 of the bills to the tune of $460 billion. So I guess we're just going to keep on printing money until the machines run out of ink and paper, because this consolidated bill only covers 30% of the government. And there are still 6 remaining bills that are going to need to be passed within the next 2 weeks before March 22nd. And the remaining bills include defense spending because they still haven't agreed on a budget for DHS or protecting the border. But I want to point out some staggering statistics that I read in a local Houston radio article. So apparently back in 1981 was the first time that US national debt reached $1 trillion for like the first time ever. And people were completely outraged. And now our debt is at like 30 times that amount, and there's no plan to pay it off. And under the Biden administration, our national debt has been growing at a rate of $1 trillion every 100 days. Like,
That's insane.
exactly. I can't even fathom it. And then on top of that, all these other countries are making money off of us in interest payments. And
Mhm.
apparently, China alone makes over $100 billion a year just on interest from US debt. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely crazy how, again, like, how is this president not compromised, number one? But like, same with the Democrats, because they're like holding it up, but same with the Republicans. It's like you have a certain group of Republicans that I think were trying to make things better, but then you have a bunch of them that are voting right in step with the Democrats. And it's like this uniparty that seems hell bent on destroying America. And it's probably because they're compromised. They were paid a lot of money to vote a certain way, because I don't know how anyone in good conscience could keep this up.
No,
It's
and
horrible.
I feel like okay, with Mike Johnson, do you feel like he caved? Like, didn't it seem like he was, this is we're absolutely not gonna, give in. And then the next thing you know, here we have this bill. And every article I read, there's no details on it. I must have read
Right.
16 of the exact same article, like word for word on different news channels, websites, and the exact same wording, and none of them detailed where any of the spending was going, except to say, like, oh, there's a portion going to, housing or this, that, and the other. And the defense spending's coming later. But this is $460 billion. Where the
Yeah.
fuck is it going?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I don't think he caved on the border thing, because that's why it didn't pass. The
Yeah.
Democrats never budge. And, for once he's like, no, we're not moving forward with that. Um, but yeah, with the 460 billion, like, I'm sure that was a big compromise. And like you said, we don't know. And I'm sure there's a ton of wasteful spending in that, but we don't know, because apparently they don't think that the American taxpayers should know where our money's going. So it's just like, it makes me mad to even talk about it, because it's the same shit, same shit. 11th hour, they pass some bullshit and no one knows what's in it. So it's crazy. And the other thing that's crazy is they are once again trying to ban TikTok.
Mhm.
And like, this time, I think it might actually go through. And the reason I think that is because the House Energy and Commerce Committee unanimously advanced the bill Thursday. And then Biden's already saying that he's going to sign it if Congress passes it. And this is actually the one thing they agree on. The one
Yeah.
thing that they have all this support on is getting rid of TikTok. And
Yep.
so you have TikTok spokesperson Alex Harrell that told The Hill, quote, "This bill is an outright ban of TikTok, no matter how much the authors try to disguise it. This legislation will trample the First Amendment rights of 170 million Americans and deprive 5 million small businesses of a platform they rely on to grow and create jobs," end quote. And people on TikTok are just pissed, and I'm pissed too. And we've talked about it a lot on the podcast, and how it is the one place where we can easily find information that's censored everywhere else. And I mean, I feel like I always hear about the news and what's going on in the world long before the mainstream media covers it. And I think that's exactly why they want it banned. They want us to stop uncovering the corruption that's going on in our government. And what better way also to interfere in an election than to take away the main platform that most Americans have information on, with politics? And like, if it is banned, I would assume that everyone's going to flock more to X or Twitter, whatever we want to call it, just because Elon Musk, it says he's trying to protect the freedom of speech. But I also wouldn't be surprised if like we start seeing other social media companies pop up and try to take some of that market share. But I am concerned. Like, I think this might go through.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing people need to realize is this is absolutely a First Amendment issue. This is a violation of free speech, which is exactly what the government has been trying to do. And like,
Yep.
obviously, TikTok users are unhappy, and the platform was urging their members to speak out against the bill and contact their local Congress last week. And a lot of users did, because I read that congressional offices were getting like hundreds of calls, and some of them were getting as many as like 20 calls a minute. And the congressional aides were overwhelmed and they actually had to turn the phones off. But I'm curious to see what the impact is going to be with younger voters, because we already have the whole Israel, Hamas thing going on, the pro-Palestinian, like young voter base that's against Biden. And now I think this is just going to add more fuel to the fire with people not voting for Biden. And again, this only highlights Biden's hypocrisy, because it's his fucking reelection campaign that joined TikTok a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, they're saying this whole, the reason for this TikTok ban is in the name of national security, and we have to protect ourselves from Chinese influence. But how funny that, like you said, it was a unanimous vote and Congress is completely united on getting rid of TikTok, but they can't come to an agreement with the real threat, which is our fucking border.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's totally a freedom of speech thing. And like I said, I mean, I look at TikTok as like, it's almost like the dark web, it's like you find information that you're not going to find anywhere else, certainly not on Facebook or Instagram. And they don't like it. They don't like it because look at how many millions of Americans are waking up and
Right.
realizing all of the corruption. They're finding that through TikTok. And yeah, I think it's scary that like our main platform can just disappear like that. I mean, this is something they would do in like China, like
Yeah.
control what people can see. I mean, and if it is a risk, let individuals take that chance, like, hey, you're going on TikTok, they might be able to get your information. Okay, well, how many other apps do we use every day that are from China? There's a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, not
So-
even just apps. There's a majority of stuff we use every day comes from China. And
Yeah.
again, it's the fact that Biden will go on TikTok, put his reelection campaign on TikTok. Okay, not him personally, but like his campaign is on TikTok. And he laughs about it and thinks it's funny. And then 2 weeks later turns around and says, "Oh, I'm going to get rid of it." Like,
Right. Well, and he's the one that's also constantly partnering with TikTok influencers and having them at the
Yes.
White House,
Mhm.
And then he's also the one that let a Chinese spy balloon go across the entire country, and that's okay, but not TikTok. There's
Yeah.
too much information on him there. It's crazy. Well, that's what we got, folks. That is the news of the week. But thanks for tuning in. And hopefully this saves you from having to watch that State of the Union speech because it was painful to get through. And you have
But we
something-
have an awesome episode coming up on Wednesday. So make
Yes.
sure you guys tune in on Wednesday, because
Oh, yes.
we've
Gonna
got
be
a
a
guest.
special
Yeah.
episode, and it's
be
good.
great.
You don't want to miss it. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.